What does it take to turn a red state blue, especially when it's a largely rural and mining red state like West Virginia? Well, my next guest has some ideas, and he's trying to put those ideas into practice. Stephen Smith is an organizer by profession. He is also a candidate for governor of West Virginia, and he is part of a broad slate of candidates known as West Virginia Can't Wait. So he's here to talk about all those things with us now. First of all, Stephen Smith, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So secondly, let's start with this. Organizer, just briefly, what does that mean in your case?
Sure. So I've had the chance to organize in Boston for a little while. In Illinois, I was part of the founding of a young adults organization in Chicago and worked with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights before moving home to West Virginia about 7 years ago, where I ran a statewide grassroots citizens organization, where we did two main things. One, we helped recruit and train and fund more than 300 rural teams to do things like community gardens, small businesses, after-school programs, solving problems in their own backyard that government wasn't helping with. But we also worked on state legislation. So we'd put 700-800 people in the state capitol every year, poor and working families, advocating and winning policy victories, more than 28 policy victories around raising the minimum wage, expanding school breakfast programs, reducing youth incarceration. And, in short, what we learned working with everyday citizens in West Virginia, among other things, was that the people of our state, the folks who are already making things happen in their neighborhoods and communities, are 10 times smarter, more compassionate, more creative than the lobbyists who run our government. And that's the idea behind the campaign, is that never in American history has one politician given us the change we want. Only movements can do that. So what would it look like to run a gubernatorial campaign, a slate of candidates in West Virginia that was attempting not just to elect one person, but was attempting to win the closest thing our state has ever had to a people's government?
So I read an article about your campaign, and it said that you had picked up a lot more money than any primary campaign contender, unless you count the incumbent governor's, I guess, transferring money from his own bank account into his campaign, but and that you've done it largely through small donations. I assume this is part of that broader strategy of resisting what you call the lobbyist-driven government, which includes, I would argue, the lobbyist-elected government.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So the people of West Virginia are completely fed up with our government. It hasn't done much for us in a long time. And so what we see, if we want a government of, by, and for the people, we have to have a campaign that's funded by people as well. And you're right, it just came out that in the last quarter, our little grassroots campaign that the political establishment was not taking as seriously as they should have, outraised every single other gubernatorial campaign in West Virginia, including our billionaire governor and his millionaire challenger, outraised all of them combined. And we've had more than 3,250 small donations. The sitting governor has had 13. So that's the kind of campaign we're building. And what that looks like is, we've had, I think we're up to 106 town halls all over the state. And at every single town hall, we're raising money as well as doing political education and organizing.
So let me ask you this. Has the Democratic Party largely, I think Jim Justice is the governor, and if I recall correctly, he was elected as a Democrat and then flipped, and Democrats who once dominated politics in West Virginia now have been replaced by Republicans. Do you think that before your campaign in the West Virginia Can't Wait campaign slate, do you think that the Democratic Party had largely written off West Virginia as a kind of a convertible, unassailable red state?
Yes. Almost everyone in the national media and the national political establishment fundamentally misunderstands our state. And of course they do, right? Because people on the coasts and elites need places like West Virginia to put their disgust, their discrimination. And so the only stories that get told about West Virginia are that we're backwards, that we vote against our own interests. And those things just aren't true. We are not a poor state. In fact, this is the wealthiest time in our state's history. It's just that wealth gets sucked up and sent out of West Virginia. It's not true that we're Trump country, that as popular as the president is in West Virginia, Bernie Sanders is more popular than he is. And crucially, the teachers and school service personnel who sparked a nationwide strike from West Virginia, they're far more popular than any politician. That what we want in West Virginia is not a conservative government. It's not a liberal government. What we want is a people's government where we know, because we've seen it, that the leadership of both parties in West Virginia far too often has answered to the exact same people. And Jim Justice is our current governor, is a perfect representation of this. The man spends his whole life getting rich off of working people and off of not paying his taxes, gets elected governor as a Democrat, switches back to being Republican. You know, the truth is that he and so many people in West Virginia politics don't really have a D or an R next to their name. It's just a dollar sign. And the people of West Virginia know that.
So let me ask you this then. And you mentioned the teachers and the popularity of the teachers and West Virginia teachers by going on strike. And other school workers, as you rightly note, started a nationwide wave. West Virginia miners, I think your website mentions the Battle of Blair Mountain, a momentous moment in labor history. West Virginia played a critical role in establishing labor rights that are now being put under increasing attack. So West Virginia has this kind of progressive history to it, but by the same token, it has this very, went very strongly for Trump and all that. So, which is, I guess, where that feeling that you describe comes from. I've always had the theory that if you talk to people one-on-one, the biggest separator, and I think it's true of voters in West Virginia and anywhere really, is whether they think you're talking BS or not, number one, whether you pass that kind of BS detector test, and number two, do you sound like you care about the things they care about and will do something about it? So if my two hypotheses are correct, how do you plan to address them?
Yeah, I mean, this is the exciting thing, right? So we need 373,000 voters in November of 2020 in order to win this race. And the traditional way of doing politics in West Virginia and everywhere else is to spend a bunch of money saying awful things about our opponents, trying to shrink the electorate, and relying on political messaging and consultants to convey what we're up to. And we will, of course, spend some money on advertising. We're raising a bunch of money, and that's great. But the real thing that we're doing differently here, and that we hope other states will learn from, is that we're building a political machine that, unlike most political machines, is actually interested in restoring power to the people and not to the entrenched power. Here's what that looks like. 229 county captains across all 55 West Virginia counties, recruited and trained and organizing all the time. It looks like 39 additional constituency teams. Veterans can't wait, students can't wait, social workers can't wait, people in recovery can't wait, ex-offenders can't wait. That no matter who you are in West Virginia, unless you're a high-paid lobbyist or coal owner or out-of-state monopoly board chairman, you are not being represented in state government. So whether it's through one of our 55 county teams, whether it's through one of our 39 constituency teams, or whether you want to run for office yourself, right? We have these 49, I believe at last count, candidates, and we're adding more each week, that our job is to create as many ways into government as possible. And the means for doing that is by building this kind of infrastructure, we can actually make it so that by election day of 2020, every single one of those 373,000 voters will have heard about the campaign one-on-one, face-to-face, from someone they know. And we're starting with that this summer, that this summer our people are having 10,000 dedicated one-on-one conversations, because those are, hundreds of times more powerful than a slick Facebook ad.
Well, you're talking my language in terms of movement-based politics, which is something I very much believe in. But, we're all realists in this world. And again, we're talking with Stephen Smith, candidate for governor of West Virginia and also part of West Virginia Can't Wait, a movement-based political organization there or affiliation there. But let me ask you this. We both know that let's hypothesize a little bit. Okay, let's say that you get the Democratic nomination. Let's say that you're up against Jim Justice. Let's say that some of these candidates who are also part of the West Virginia Can't Wait slate get their nominations too. We both know that business interests will throw a ton of money into doing just exactly the kind of politics you described. They're communists, they're lefties, they're not real West Virginians, they don't have West Virginia. I mean, you could probably write it as well as I can, right? We know how these games are played, the smears start, the attacks start. Have you guys done any sort of advanced thinking about how to react against that and keep getting your message across?
Of course. And so I actually think this is one of the big things that Democrats get wrong. First of all, the West Virginia Can't Wait slate or pledge that's being built up includes some Republicans, pro-labor Republicans, that there are people in both parties in West Virginia who are interested in taking down the sort of good old boy establishment. And in West Virginia, a lot of the people that got us into this mess were and are Democrats. So I just want to be clear about that. But to answer your question, what happens when our opponents start tagging us with all of these extremist and radical and all of that stuff? And I'll tell you, one of the things that we feel really comfortable about is that our job is not to try to get our opponents to be okay with us. And I think that's a major mistake that national Democrats make, that our job is to be for something so bold that it brings our people, poor and working people, off their couches to vote. That's our actual job, that more people stayed home in 2016 in West Virginia than voted for the president. And so if we want to do that, part of our theory, one of the things we are counting on and hoping for is for the political establishment to react in a big, offended, violent way against what we're doing, because that's part of how we communicate our authenticity to the people of West Virginia, that when that happens, it will be a message to West Virginia voters that we are, in fact, doing something fundamentally differently, and that's why our opponents are reacting or overreacting as much as we expect them to. So in some respects, we are trying to be as out front as possible about our desire to shift who in West Virginia has political power and economic power. That is our goal, to fundamentally shift who in the state owns the economy and owns the government. We're being totally upfront about that. We're not trying to appease those corporate interests because we want them to attack us, because that's part of how we tell the story that what we're doing is something fundamentally different.
Or as FDR said of the bankers, I welcome their hatred, right?
Exactly.
So if you could, if you had the chance right now to speak one sentence to every person in West Virginia, what would it be? Don't
believe the lie that every politician tells you that they can solve our problems. The only people who can do that is us. I can't do it. No single politician can. Come help us build the state that you want. And if you're interested in that and are willing to do the work and willing to work with people who are different from you, there is a place for you in this movement and in this campaign.
Well, that's a really long sentence, but we'll let it pass. And where can people go to find out more about your campaign and what you're doing and maybe help you out if they want?
Yeah, we'd love to help. WVCan'tWait.com is our website. On Facebook, we're at WVCan'tWait and at WVCan'tWait on Twitter. My email address is steven@WVCan'tWait.com. This is a campaign that fundamentally believes that every single person ought to be a part of their own government. And so if that's you, or if you want to get in touch with me or try to figure out what role that might be or cover the campaign or donate, feel free to get in touch with me directly and we'll help you find the right person.
And that's Stephen with a PH, not a V, right?
Correct.
All
yes.
right. Okay. Well, Stephen Smith, candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor and candidate on the West Virginia Can't Wait slate there in West Virginia. Thanks for coming on the program. Good to talk to you.
My pleasure. I hope to come back soon.